Okay, hello. Our speaker tonight is Karman Meyer, and she is a dietitian and culinary coach with 15 years of experience in the field. She's the author of Eat to Sleep, What to Eat and When to Eat It for a Good Night's Sleep, and Everything Dash Diet Meal Prep Cook, and the host of Eat to Sleep, a PBS program. Carmen has been featured in publications such as Bon Appetit, Shape Magazine, Food Network, and Women's Health Magazine. As the founder and the recipe creator behind the nutritionadventure.com, Carmen is passionate about sharing the facts about food and nutrition with readers, and she works to encourage others to feel more confident in the kitchen and to enjoy food, not fear it. So I am going to turn it over to you, Carmen. I'm going to take the pin off of me and then you can share your slides if you like.
Okay, there we go. You should see those slides, I hope.
Yes.
Right. Well, thank you, Jen, for that introduction and for inviting me to join you all virtually tonight. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, so a little ways away, but it's great to be with all of you here virtually to discuss foods to enhance sleep and fight stress. And this is a topic that is often overlooked, but it's incredibly important. So I would just like to know, I think there's a way to like raise your hand with the Zoom reactions, or you can put it in the chat. But have you ever thought about how food can help you sleep better? Sometimes we think about how food might hurt our sleep, like if we have too much caffeine or alcohol. But have you ever thought about food helping you sleep? I see some people chatting. Okay, no. Trisha gave me a thumbs up. That might mean yes, or just hadn't thought about it. But I know that it's just not a commonly discussed topic. So we think about a lot of other aspects when it comes to sleep. What's our environment like? Or are we stressed? And sometimes even maybe we might think about medication interactions, but there's more and more research that's showing how nutrition can improve sleep. So there's also this interconnectedness between sleep, what we eat, and how we respond to stress, whether it's like an acute stressor or chronic stress. And as we all know, cancer treatment can be physically and emotionally demanding. And it's during these times in particular where prioritizing our well-being becomes even more crucial, and that includes sleep. So sleep really is at that foundation of good health. And so it's when our bodies repair, rejuvenate, and strengthen our immune system. It's when memories become consolidated. So there's a lot of really important things going on during sleep, and we'll talk about a lot of that during the slides. But we're going to specifically look at the food, how it can help sleep, and then also fight stress so that we can be proactive to enhance our well-being and our health, and set ourselves up for success, even when we're facing adversity. So let's get into it. Jen, thank you for that intro again. It's just a slide to show the books that she mentioned. Many of you have Eat to Sleep, which I'm so grateful that you were able to get a copy of that. And then my cookbook is focused on DASH diet, which if you haven't heard of DASH, it actually is an acronym, stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, so high blood pressure. And high blood pressure is very common in our country, across the globe. And there's a lot of ways that we can use food to actually help lower blood pressure. So that's what that's about. I also am a business owner. My company is Nourish Well Network, and we go out into the community and into businesses and share nutrition presentations just like this, and do cooking classes too. And Jen mentioned the PBS special, which is actually on Eat to Sleep. That's the title of the PBS program. And that was just me on the set there. And that began airing in 2023. I kind of already hinted at, what we're getting into tonight, but We'll talk about how food actually impacts our sleep and stress, the foods that we can have for better sleep, foods that we can eat to help become more resilient to stressors, and foods that we can eat more of to increase energy. That's probably one of the biggest things that I talk to most people about, is just how do we feel better so we can be better every day. And then lastly, practical recipes, menu ideas, those foods that we can actually eat more of, because we don't eat nutrients, right? We eat food. So we can talk about the nutrition piece, but what does that actually mean when we're thinking about the foods to buy at the store and put on our plate? So that's going to be a big focus, is the practical ways to improve our sleep and stress through those foods. All right, so you probably know this, but all mammals need sleep. All creatures have some form of sleep. There's not anything on this planet living that does not have a form of sleep. It might look different from how we sleep. You think about cats and dogs, and they sleep a lot more than we do, or babies for that matter. They have to sleep a lot more than what we do as adults. But there's not one major organ in the body or process in the brain that isn't enhanced by sleep or impaired by a lack of sleep. So it's important for health, weight, energy levels, and so much more. 33% of Americans are not getting enough sleep each night. And studies show that as many as half of all people have sleep-related problems during treatment for cancer. And those sleep problems might result from side effects of treatment, medicines you're taking, long hospital stays, stress, and other factors. And so it's important with any health issue to, number one, kind of know those things, to know how we're impacted, right? So that we can then maybe find some solutions or some workarounds, or at least even just talking about it in conversation. So I'm curious if you're comfortable sharing, again, either with a hand raise or in the chat, is anyone struggling to sleep like 7-8 hours a night? If you're comfortable sharing. Right. Yes, we've got a few yeses. Okay. Maybe it was a big motivator for tuning in this evening. And we'll talk about some ways that we can try to tackle that issue. But first, I'd like to just cover like what is insomnia. There is a clinical definition to that, and it's defined as a persistent difficulty falling or remaining asleep despite the opportunity or the motivation to do so. So that could either be chronic, meaning it happens 3 times a week for at least 3 months, then it would be chronic insomnia, or it could be acute, so it lasts less than that. So most common reasons for chronic insomnia are psychological worry and anxiety. So the things that are truly keeping us up at night. And by the same token, lack of proper rest can then contribute to stress. So, the stress and the sleep, they are so interconnected, and there's kind of that bi-directional relationship where if we're feeling stressed, feeling anxious, we may not sleep well. And then because we're not sleeping well, that actually heightens our anxiety. And then it's just a negative cycle from there. So it can be really hard to break the cycle. Again, that's where food or even exercise, as I know you all have talked about recently, how those things can actually help to break that cycle so that we can start making some more positive improvements in those areas. And so there's different types of insomnia, being sleep onset, meaning difficulty falling asleep, or sleep maintenance, difficulty staying asleep throughout the night, or you can kind of have a combination of both. So again, sleeping is important for physical and mental health. And when one area of our health might suffer, then it's really easy for other areas to soon suffer as well. So if we think about a night or a couple nights where we didn't sleep well, our food choices actually start to change. We've seen this in a lot of research. We just start to crave different things when we're sleep deprived. And so then we're eating things that maybe you don't have enough nutritional value or density. So we're not getting all the good nutrients in that our body really needs. And then those negative or not so great for us foods then can create an inflammatory response in the body, which then leads to more stress, low energy, and that again, that cycle kind of starts over. So again, those studies are really showing we're more likely to reach for things that have a lot of sugar, a lot of salt, and a lot of fat when we are sleep deprived. And that's because we're just trying to get energy in. And I use this in quotes because while it does give us kind of a source of energy, it's not the really long, sustaining, well balanced energy that our body really needs in the long run. So I'm curious, we kind of already discussed the or who may be having issues with sleep currently, but I'm curious if you've ever noticed when you have been sleep deprived, do you start to choose certain foods? You can put that in the chat. Like, what do you crave? Maybe when you didn't have a good night of sleep or when you're stressed. And you said sugar. Yep. Chocolate and salt. Yeah. Carbs. Yeah. And that would be me, I think. And I notice that more or even after like a nap. And the reason is that again, our body's like you wake up or maybe you haven't had that sleep in a while and you're like, I need something. I need quick energy, and sugar and carbohydrates are that. Now, carbohydrates are necessary. We'll talk about this. They are necessary. So we don't want to cut out carbohydrates, but we know that there are high quality carbohydrates and then there are the lower quality carbohydrates that again aren't giving us a good balance of nutrients to really support the body. All right, so what is good sleep? 7 to 8 hours for adults is considered a good night's sleep. Some people might feel like they can do with less sleep and they may be able to, like energy wise, they might feel good. But research keeps showing us again and again how important it is for prevention of chronic diseases like diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So there's more to sleep than just waking up feeling refreshed. Again, it's about all of those other things that are happening that we may not be aware of, but it can really impact our health in the long run. And the reduction of the stress and anxiety levels as well. And people who are well rested typically perform 20% quicker, like at physical tasks. So our response time is just quicker. And then I mentioned how it's a restorative process and memory consolidation happens. So recalling things in the short term, that's where sleep is vital to help with that short-term memory. And immune health is another area of the body where sleep is doing a lot of work. We don't even know it while we're resting at night, but it's helping to build a stronger immune memory and stronger immune response when we sleep. So it's not something that we want to intentionally put off, and because there are times where we might choose to stay up later or choose to get certain tasks done instead of focusing on sleep. So sometimes that's a choice, but sometimes it's not a choice, right? Whether or not we actually fall asleep. There can be other things that are keeping us up. But people getting less than 6 hours of sleep are more than 4 times as likely to become ill after exposure to flu virus. So it's pretty amazing. And that is in a very short period of time. So that's like 2 days of sleep deprivation, and we're seeing those results or those impacts on immune health. So how do we get back to better sleep? We do have to determine what's really causing the sleep troubles, right? It's not going to be the same for everyone. If it is stress, how can we try to handle that, manage that? Is it pain? Is there something we can do to help reduce that pain? Nutrient deficiencies, sleep apnea, maybe we need a CPAP machine to help, or a lack of sleep routine. And sometimes it could be several of these, but it's important to talk to your healthcare team if you're having any difficulty sleeping so that they can help you and give you the best plan. And it is important to address that as early on as possible before the chronic insomnia sets in. And just to point out, the first three bullet points on here, stress, pain, nutrient deficiencies, those can all be positively impacted by food. It's not the only answer necessarily. The nutrient deficiencies is, but again, stress and pain, it could actually be related to what we're eating or partially related to that. So we'll talk about the anti-inflammatory foods and how we may help reduce pain and stress through what we eat. So 3 out of 4 of the most underconsumed nutrients for Americans actually play an important role in getting a good night's sleep. And those are potassium, calcium, and vitamin D. So most Americans are not getting enough of these nutrients on a daily basis. And if you ever look at the nutrition facts panel on a product, at the very bottom of that label, you'll see these 3 nutrients plus fiber listed. And that's because they want to point out how much of that nutrient you're getting in that product, because they know that Americans aren't getting enough. So we're really kind of focused on that from a nutrition labeling standpoint right now. So when it comes to things that we can focus on, with the book, it really dives into 50 foods that we can eat more of. And each section or each section that talks about the individual food explains the nutrients that are there and how it can help. Also gives ideas for how to include it. But I wanted to provide you tonight with kind of a quick summary of what those things are so that you have more of a action plan after our time together. So things that we can really try to focus on. And this isn't something that, every single day we have to say, yes, I got all my fiber, and yes, I ate enough magnesium, and yes, I met my hydration goals perfectly. Every day's not going to be perfect. I don't eat, perfectly, again, quotes, air quotes there, because things happen, life happens, and I like to think about this on more of a week to week kind of basis. Like if I know that yesterday I didn't really eat any fruits, well, today I'm going to try to focus on that, make sure I get more fruits in. Or if I didn't eat any whole grains at all yesterday, then how can I try to be more intentional about that today? So we're not beating ourselves up for not being perfect with our nutrition. Nobody is. And so these are just goals for our week to week. One is filling up on fiber-rich foods. And the reason for that is because a lot of our fiber-rich foods have the important nutrients or some important nutrients that can help with sleep. Some of that being vitamin B6 that we find in whole grains. And that vitamin B6 is important for creating melatonin. So you've probably heard of melatonin as being important for sleep, but we need the right nutrients from our foods to help make that melatonin in the body naturally. I always compare it to like having the right tools in the toolbox so you can do a good job. Because if we're just putting duct tape on everything, trying to fix it, that will only last for so long, right? That's not really a good, like high quality fix. So we want to have the right tools, which means the right nutrients, so that our body can do a good job for us. Magnesium-rich foods. Magnesium is actually another nutrient that most of us aren't getting enough of that every day. And that would be things like avocado, pumpkin seeds, nuts, leafy green vegetables. And magnesium is essential for good sleep. It's also helpful when it comes to migraines and headaches. And if you experience something like that, or feel like maybe you don't eat a lot of these foods that I just listed, avocado, pumpkin seeds, nuts, green vegetables, then it might be one of those things that like, hey, how can I get a little more magnesium into my day to day? The third one here, being mindful of caffeine and alcohol intake. And caffeine sometimes can hide in places like, green tea. It still has caffeine. Or if you like iced tea, there will be some caffeine there. Or even dark chocolate. If you happen to be caffeine sensitive, then that could potentially cause some issues if you're eating it at night. So I like to point that out because I know I like a little bit of chocolate at night sometimes, and I am pretty caffeine sensitive. So just being aware that if you're similar to me and can't handle a lot of caffeine, dark chocolate could be too much for you. The fourth one here, or like, let me go back to alcohol real quick. Just to state that alcohol does interfere with the deeper stages of sleep. And unfortunately, there's not really much of a workaround around that, but besides limiting alcohol and having that at least 4 to 5 hours before bed. And then our fourth bullet point here, limiting high fat foods or acidic foods at night, especially if you're prone to reflux. Those could be very problematic. And high fat foods would include fried foods and some processed meats, kind of depends on what it is. And then other certain cuts of meat. So we have our leaner cuts of meat, and then we have the not lean cuts. So focusing more on like chicken breast, fish, lean cuts of pork or beef, if you eat those. And then things like beans or tofu, those vegetarian sources of protein, those would all be lower in fat. Choosing melatonin-rich foods. So there are foods that actually contain melatonin naturally, one of them being tart cherries or tart cherry juice. Maybe you've heard of that one. Seems to be gaining a lot of popularity. And so it does need to say tart cherry in order to really have more of the melatonin. But also eggs, the egg yolk has melatonin. And then pistachios and almonds are other good sources. We have adequate hydration here. That's so important for many areas of health, but it also can impact how we sleep at night, especially if you're prone to snoring, or if you know someone that snores. If they are dehydrated, that actually makes snoring worse. That could lead to sleep disruption, by waking themselves up, or if you're with someone who snores, they'll be waking you up too. And lastly, our carbohydrates, fat, and protein at meals and snacks. And I'll get into a little more detail on this, but remember I said those carbohydrates are important, and they really are, but we want to try to include more of the whole grain carbohydrates. So things like oatmeal, barley, quinoa, if you tried that, or whole wheat bread, whole wheat pastas, brown rice. Those are all whole grain carbs. There's also whole grain cereals. And the reason for that is, can we get more fiber, which was kind of step number one here, or point number one on this slide, more fiber. And then the vitamin B6 that we also get from those whole grains. Fat sometimes gets a bad rap, but we also need fat. It's good for our brain. And as far as meal times go and feeling satisfied after a meal, if we don't have some fat, then it's highly likely that we'll be hungry soon after. And so this is really important throughout the day, but I think about this sometimes at like dinner time. If we don't have this balance of nutrients and have enough fat, then we might wake up hungry in the middle of the night, and we need to get something in. And then protein, mentioned the like lean proteins versus our higher fat proteins, but we want to have that or those three things at all meals and all snacks. And when I give examples of the things we can actually be eating, I'll explain that a little bit more, and you'll know what those carbs, fats, and proteins are. So some other things that we can do to help improve sleep, if you're struggling with that are not so much food related. One is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, and that's just changing our thought process or some of those feelings around sleep. Because when we go a long time not sleeping well, then you kind of start to expect that you won't sleep well. And they have shown, this type of therapy has really shown that when we can change that thought and that mindset around sleep, sometimes that's how we can then improve sleep. So if that kind of is something that you can relate to, if like having those negative thoughts around sleep, it may be helpful to talk to someone about those thoughts so that we can start to shift them. And then setting a healthy bedtime routine is very, very important. There's a lot of power in that. It can actually help train the body and the brain for sleep. So, I know many of us might stay up watching TV or scrolling on our phone, or maybe both at the same time, right up until it's time for bed. And that blue light from our screens, our devices, really impacts the melatonin being released, which signals to the brain and the body that it's time to prepare for sleep. So we're not getting that release of melatonin. And so then if we try to go to bed right after staring at our phone or TV, it can be really hard to fall asleep. And so by changing that like 30 minutes or an hour before bed, we can help with that melatonin release, and again train our bodies, our minds to say, hey, this is what we do every night at, let's say, 10 p.m. So you know that when I get in bed and I lay my head down, it is time for sleep. Herbal tea could be a part of that routine. Things like chamomile tea, or maybe valerian root, something you definitely want to discuss again with your healthcare team, just to make sure it's okay for you to do. And then there are some yoga stretches that we can do for sleep to just have that physical response to calm the body, calm the mind as we get ready for sleep. There are breathing techniques that actually help reduce our blood pressure, our heart rate. One of those is called the 4-7-8 breath. Maybe you've heard of it, but you want to check that out. It's just called 4-7-8 breathing. Again, it will reduce the heart rate and actually helps reduce those stress levels, which is a great thing before bed. A warm bath or shower might work. And again, limiting technology use. And if you're trying to make some of these changes and see if they've been helpful in helping you to sleep more or not, I usually recommend to my clients that they use a food or sleep log to track those changes, things that are stressing you out from day to day or on a weekly basis, and then the sleep patterns as well. So you can start to make some connections, like with the chocolate thing. I had a client who always drank hot chocolate before bed. Come to find out, she never drank any other caffeine throughout the entire day. She was very caffeine sensitive, but she would have that hot chocolate and then she couldn't sleep very well. So it's just where you can maybe uncover some things that might either hurt your sleep or could help your sleep. All right, so that was a lot on sleep. And if you have questions, you can maybe put them in the chat or jot them down. That way we have time at the end, but I'll move on to kind of the next section here, which is foods for fighting stress. And the good thing here is that there's a lot of overlap between the foods we should be eating more of to help with sleep and the foods that we can eat more of to also help with stress. And remember, then if we're sleeping better, then we have a better stress response. And if we're less stressed, then we sleep better. So all these things are really helping to support each other. But there are many chronic diseases linked to chronic inflammation, and that can impact our mood and our quality of life. And so we want to focus on anti-inflammatory foods. And so when I'm saying stress here, it is stress in the body, which is inflammation, but that inflammation can actually increase our like stress response emotionally. So when we're not having the high levels of stress and inflammation in the body, and our cortisol levels can then be reduced, then we can actually manage some of that day-to-day stress a little bit better. And so inflammatory foods, on the flip side, we have anti-inflammatory, and then we have inflammatory foods. Those inflammatory foods contribute to more inflammation. So fried foods, sodas, the refined carbohydrates, so meaning they don't have much fiber. That would be things like soda, candy, most pastries, white pastas or breads. These are all considered refined. And then processed meats, that would be things like hot dogs or bacon, sausages, some lunch meats. Some are a little more processed than others. So it kind of just depends on what we're looking at there. And then for fighting stress and those anti-inflammatory foods, vitamin C is definitely a key one. And you probably think about that a lot more in the wintertime. We always hear, oh, take your vitamin C for immune health. And that's part of that stress management as well. Magnesium, again, we talked about that with sleep specifically, but magnesium is helping us to sleep better because it is helping to stabilize our cortisol levels. Cortisol is something that is released when it's kind of that fight or flight response, and we have to be alert. And we don't want to be relaxed when we have to have that fight or flight response. But if that kind of continues at any time or day in, day out, or in the middle of the night when we're not sleeping, then that becomes or it has negative effects on our body. Vitamin B6, again, we touched on that one, and how it's important for serotonin and melatonin production. And serotonin is kind of known as that happy neurotransmitter, feelings of just good mood. And so we want to make sure we have enough of that from, well, I'll go to my next slide and we can look at that specifically. So vitamin B6 rich foods, whole grains, salmon, beans, nuts, and eggs. Those are all good sources of the vitamin B6, which helps with stress response and sleep. Those magnesium rich foods that we talked about. I'm not sure if I mentioned bananas before, but that's another one. And then omega-3s, they're important for our brain, for our heart, also for fighting stress. We can find that in a lot of like fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, even sardines, flax seeds, walnuts, chia seeds, and hemp seeds are other good sources of omega-3s. And then the vitamin C that we talked about, a lot of our fruits and veggies have vitamin C, but here are some specific ones that if you're like, oh man, I love blueberries, I could definitely eat more of those. Well, then there you go. That's a good way to get those blueberries in, or strawberries. And then lastly, herbs and spices, ginger, turmeric, cinnamon, oregano. These are all herbs or spices that we can try to make use of every day to help fight stress and inflammation in the body. For increased energy, briefly touched on the balance of the carbs, fat, and protein. So what that might actually look like on your plate, as you can see here, a quarter of our plate should be a protein food. Maybe it's the salmon. A quarter of our plate should have those whole grains. I think that might be either brown rice or quinoa. It's hard to tell from that picture. And then filling up with half fruits and veggies. And they can be canned, frozen, fresh, juice form, dried. All forms count when it comes to fruits and veggies. Now with fruit juice and dried fruits, our portions might be a little bit smaller than like if we were having a salad, but we're still getting a fruit serving, so it counts. And this is kind of the easy way to think about nutrition without having to think about like, am I getting enough magnesium? Am I getting enough vitamin B6? Am I getting enough vitamin C? When we just think about our plate as this kind of visual, with half of it being fruits and veggies, quarter being protein, a quarter being grains, it makes it so much easier. Again, I'm thinking about all the individual nutrients, because that's a lot. I don't think about the daily nutrients every day. I just try to do most meals, we'll say 80% of the time, try to strive for something like this. And then we know that we're getting a good balance. Lastly here on increased energy, before we get into specific like meal ideas, B12 is a nutrient we haven't talked about, but I think a lot of people, when it comes to energy, it is the first vitamin that's often recommended or looked at. And so it helps convert fat and protein into energy for our body to use. And foods with B12 mostly come from animal sources. So if you're eating any kind of food that came from an animal, it will have B12. But then there are also foods that are fortified with that nutrient. And we have omega-3s here again. They're healthy fats that can actually help to fight the fatigue. And we talked about those food sources, so I just listed those here again. Now getting into actually putting it into practice. We talked about a lot of nutrients. There's some overlap there, but what does that look like? So starting with breakfast, if you like oatmeal, we can top that with some of those chia seeds for omega-3 fatty acids. We know that the oatmeal is giving us those whole grains and that vitamin B6. We get our fresh or frozen berries on top, add some cinnamon, and we have a very well-balanced meal here. You could even have an egg with your oatmeal for a little more protein. but those chia seeds also have protein. So that's one option. Or if you like something maybe a little more savory, egg with whole grain toast, add some avocado and some tomato. You could add some other veggies on there. Sometimes I'll sprinkle on some like chopped pistachios. So you could add anything that sounds good to you, but that's one of my favorite breakfasts, just having egg and avocado on toast. Or if you're not maybe a huge breakfast eater and you don't want to like sit down and eat something, a smoothie is a good option. But with smoothies, we want to make sure we have enough protein in there and that we're not adding too many carbohydrate sources. We want to have a good balance again between the protein, carbs, and fat. So yogurt base, add maybe 2 fruits that you love, and then a veggie. I like to use spinach because once you blend it up, you can't even taste it. And then sprinkle in some cinnamon for that anti-inflammatory food. Next, we have lunch and dinner meals. This picture here is actually for a recipe that's in Eat to Sleep. And, a leafy green salad with some salmon on top, avocado, pumpkin seeds. You could use a homemade dressing or store-bought, whichever you prefer. And if you don't have time to make a salad, I rely on those bagged salad kits pretty often when I just need to kind of get more veggies in and don't have fresh greens on hand. Might just pick up a bagged salad kit and then add protein of choice. Power bowls are kind of a popular thing, or in kind of rice bowl. This was my lunch today. We had some rice and it was, I will say, white rice does also have fiber, so don't feel like it always has to be, brown rice. You will get some more fiber there, but if you like white rice, do that. And then just add plenty more fiber to it with those veggies. Add your protein of choice. Maybe it's beans or shrimp. And yeah, you have a great meal. Salsa, some cilantro. Lastly, it could be something as simple as just a piece of toast or, making a sandwich with some tuna salad and a side of fruit. Doesn't have to be, fancy or take hardly any time at all to have a good meal. Snacks, again, even as snacks, we want to remember protein, fiber, and fat. So here's just a few really easy snack ideas. An apple with nut butter, whether you like peanut butter or almond butter, cashew butter, any of those will work because you're getting the protein and fat from that. Your apple is your carbohydrate, which provides some fiber. So you have perfect balance, plus you're getting good nutrition. Cheese and crackers, good snack. Greek yogurt, berries, nuts, or maybe just some nuts and dried fruit paired together, a boiled egg and a piece of fruit, maybe a banana or some grapes, and then cottage cheese and fruit. Again, this picture is just a blueberry cottage cheese parfait. I added some whole grain cereal and a little bit of coconut, and that's a pretty satisfying snack. You could even eat that for breakfast. For something a little sweet, if we do have a sweet tooth at night or at any point during the day, berries and that dark chocolate, unless you're caffeine sensitive and you have to avoid it at night. Greek yogurt, some cinnamon and walnuts. Our yogurt has, again, protein, and I do suggest finding a yogurt that has some fat in it to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Plus, we need that fat. And then cinnamon for anti-inflammatory properties, walnuts for those omega-3s, plus a little more protein and healthy fats. I mentioned the cottage cheese and fruit already, and then a smoothie like the one pictured here. It has a protein in it, fruit, add a veggie, and then some chia seeds maybe for fiber and omega-3 fatty acids. So we have, I think, exactly like 9 minutes, close to 10 minutes left, which I would definitely want to leave some time for Q&A. But I know that's a lot of information. And so thankfully you do have the recording of this and the book to turn to for more in-depth information about those foods that we talked about.